So sampling, sampled, sampling.
Wow. Say that 5 times fast.
I'm not going to even do it because Red August will laugh too much. I saw I saw something that was shared on IG a long time ago. It was an interview with Prince, and he was talking about how detrimental it could be when the people that are sampling, how the hip hop sampling had got out of control. He said eventually people are going to start sampling the sampled works.
That's going on right now.
He was like, it's really going to get OC. And then you flash to now, and this is where we are. And Prince was a visionary, obviously, but he literally called what's happening. So from a producer standpoint, Lone, I'll come to you first because I have 2 questions for you, but I'm going to save one for later as it relates to production. But the sampling, the sampled, do we look at that as almost like an alley-oop because nostalgia takes you back to the vibe of the original and then someone else can kind of sprinkle around it and try to make a hit record? You see what I'm saying? Like, if you sample a popular record from Jodeci, that's going to remind me of that no matter how you chop it.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if that's necessarily a cheat code per se, but that's kind of weird the way they're being sampled because they're taking full loops of these records that were top records and not doing anything to them. The original hooks are still in there, all of that. Like, what do you think about that from a production standpoint?
I don't know, honestly. I always think it's weird to hear first off, as a producer, I've always strayed away from sampling stuff that samples. So like,
you've always been
I've never sampled like a hip hop record that was sampling something. I don't know. I felt like it was like against the rules, and I mean there really are no rules, but it was against my rules.
It's you have morals with it.
I just felt like if I sample something that you do.
Mm-hmm.
That's super weird to me. I don't know. Like if you make a record and then I sample you and you sampled somebody else, it's like, I don't know. It's just super, super interesting. I don't know if there's anything wrong with it though, as long as you give credit where it's deserved.
That is important.
And you follow the lineage. I will say that I think it's important to understand the history of music no matter what you're doing. I think that portion is something that could very easily get left out, especially as you sample samples of samples. You know what I mean?
Good point.
I feel like the more it jumps into it, the less amount of money you could start making as an artist because you're going to have to be paying just like a bazillion writers for everything, So, I mean, I don't know if I have a definitive take on this.
They might not clear the sample.
That's a good point.
So that's a point. I don't know if we brought it up last week, but if one person if you're sitting in a room and you're making a song, you're like, yeah, let's sample this, and it turns out great, and then one person of the 75 owners says no, then you gotta redo it.
Yeah,
it seems like a waste of time. I don't know.
Or if the said artist that you sampled it from initially, they liked that particular way it was used, and then you want to sample it again, and like, nah, I'm not letting you sample it.
Yeah, there's just too many. I feel like there's just too many hands in the pot. I'm all for collaboration, and if you can get it to work, that's cool. But I just don't feel like it's a smart thing to do. I don't feel like it's smart as a producer. It is lazy to an extent because it's like, again, it lacks the whole aspect of in my opinion, it lacks the whole like doing your research aspect of it. If I can sample Maja chopping something up in a very specific way, or whatever his loop is or whatever his chop is, then I feel like I'm kind of getting influenced off what he's doing and using his interpolation of something else
to take it another direction,
rather than listen to how the original composition was made and then putting my own spin on something. There's levels to it. I don't know if I'll ever really get super behind like sampling somebody that's sampling something, but realistically it's mostly because it just doesn't make sense from what Fonte say? Why don't I make a new song and make new money? I don't know. Like it just doesn't make sense.
He's cut from that cloth though.
That's what I mean.
You know what I'm saying?
And he was talking about mixtapes when he said that, but I've always agreed with that. Like, why would I put out a mixtape that's like an album that's got a whole bunch of beats that are other people's rather than make new music and make new money when I own everything?
That's true.
Jump in there, Terry.
And I give to your point, that's true, but I give Lil Wayne credit where credit is due because he was annihilating those.
It was an era. You had to be there.
Yeah, you had to be there. But as far as that's concerned, the sample, the most popular producer out right now, radio wise, hit maker, that's all he does.
There is.
Just takes samples that were samples and kind of manipulates it a little bit and puts his own little twist on it. But
what Diddy was doing.
Yeah, that's what Diddy was taking stuff that hadn't been sampled yet,
but they were
just looping it.
But they were like hit records.
Yeah,
they were
definitely hit records. It wasn't the same way, and that's kind of why I respect Dre a lot as a producer, because he was taking snippets and stuff from Parliament Funkadelic, but they had so much instrumentation in their music that you could pull from a section and add to it, and you know what I'm saying, give it your own flavor. And I didn't see his production as lazy,
right,
so to speak. And I'm not gonna say all the producers of today are lazy as far as just taking something that's already been made and putting it back out there. But what it does is it kind of makes us, the older people, and we're pretty much in the same boat as our parents and everybody else whose music is being sampled.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is we came from an era where stuff was being sampled, and now people are coming back and pulling from that. So to us, it makes us feel a certain type of way, but in a sense, it's still no different than our parents was looking at.
Not really.
The music that was sampled when we were kids.
That's kind of why I'm like on the fence, really. Like I would never take a loop from anybody, but if I heard a couple like stabs or something that I like, or a couple like short, yeah, I might position that in a different way. You know what I mean? Like I might chop something up that I hear that's sampled of something, but like that. But in general, there's no way I'm gonna put a loop of something that's already a loop on something like that. I'm just not gonna do it.
To Terry's point about the producer that's, popping off with the records, I actually think that it'll enhance the record because of people like us, or at least I'll speak for myself, that would be triggered when I hear that old sample and I'm like, oh, that's dope. And then it'll make me want to go listen to that record just because of how I felt when I heard the sample, if that makes sense. So to that point, I mean, it's smart because you're crossing generations. Like you can subconsciously bring people in, and just off nostalgia. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, hey, get it. I want to ask you specifically, Lone, because we go through the routine as producers, and sometimes it's I don't know, but we're from a different era.
Yeah, it's like that. It's sometimes I just have to get out of my own way and be like, yo, actually, this is kind of fire. So I'm gonna just use it and kind of. But
Jay Moore, in this one for me, man. What you think? Cheat code? You like it?
I guess it depends on how it's done. Just like anything else. There are, when I think about say the Isley Brothers, Between the Sheets. Think about how many times we've heard that song. Big Papa.
It was sampled 3 times.
Summer in
Miami
by Jim Jones. Ignorant
Man
by Jay-Z off the American Gangster album.
Yep.
These are 3 takes on the same sample. But one of the things that I guess I would be concerned with if I was a producer and say somebody came behind me and sampled something I sampled that perhaps you're gonna get to snitching on what I did, and I didn't. I produced this beat, and I was able to get away with it because of the way I chopped and flipped some things. And then when it's time for you to come sample my chop and my flip of something else, then you get your lawyers on it and find the original. And get to sample snitching on me, and then you create a whole bunch of problems that I did not sign up for.
That's a good point.
Do you think that people are still getting away with the blatant samples though? Because a lot of these are,
you can't
as soon
sample
as you hear
Rick James or the Temptations or
Stevie, none of that.
But there's still some stuff out there off of crazy B-sides. If you just taking like a drum from here, or just maybe a like a stab or something, or there are people. Look, right now it is catch me if you can in the world of sampling, and it's been like that for a while.
It's the wild west,
but it's
right now.
But it's definitely going to change. And we talk about the technology of content ID and everything related to that. I would be, if my advice to anybody that's going to sample and it's not going to clear a sample. Historically, it's been, as long as you're not huge or you're not putting out a huge record, you're going to be okay. But think about your future. Think about the fact that who knows? Sure, put out a project today. Maybe you'll be fine. You put it out, content ID, you'll come through. But who knows what technology is going to look like in 5 years? It's going to be able to pick up a half of a second of something and be able to.
Sometimes it does pick it up that fast.
It does. Sometimes I think the technology is actually already there.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just be super, super careful about that. The content ID matches are crazy across, just video as well. Like video, like it's
YouTube.
there. That's why this whole sample splice industry and everything related to it. I just be careful. Like this is why another thing, like, not to go there necessarily, but in teaching, like I intentionally teach every student I have, like how to do this stuff.
Right.
And we don't use Gobinators in the chat. Like I don't teach, you can't even use sample packs. I don't even allow it. Like you can't use it because I want you to be able to do it yourself and to be able to learn how to do these things, because long term, it's not going to be, I don't know, man, like unless you're huge. Imagine putting a whole bunch of time into a project and you put it out and then you get blocked from your distribution channel because you're sampling somebody's stuff, and they, then you can't even use that distribution company anymore. Or maybe you get sued in 5 years because they finally catch up to the technology with all the legal stuff.
And be clear, they will come back.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what? I wouldn't even be mad at that, because
mad at what?
I wouldn't be mad at people for a segment of time and weren't sampling anything. Because when you think of musicians back in the day, back when bands were the thing,
True.
like people got together and had actual bands, they were coming up with their own stuff.
Right.
So it's going to make the musician be more creative and think more outside of the box, rather than relying on, I got an idea from this sound that's already been created. I think it actually built better musicians personally.
You mean to force people
if
to?
If it was they crack down on it. I see your point.
I think it's.
I agree with that.
And don't get me wrong, I have nothing wrong with people getting their money that they're owed in that aspect. I'm just saying, be careful if that's what you do. You know what I mean?
Or be more creative with your sample.
For sure.
There was an era where, the producers that we grew up watching and listening to, they could manipulate samples so well. You'd have to be ahead to find out what was going on in terms of the samples, because they chopped it up so well. It was
a prime example of that.
There we go. Those joints, like there are people that have made so many of those joints that we grew up with, where I'm like, hey, how did he do that? And you can't tell what it is. To your sample snitching point.
Well, you know what? When you listen to an album like the Beastie Boys' second album, Paul's Boutique, I don't think with now the sampling laws and everything being in place, there's absolutely no way they'd be able to even make that record and release it.
Yeah,
right. Like there's so much. They'll take something from a little something from a movie, and maybe they'd be able to get away with some of it as far as fair use. But if they had to pay everybody like that, it would cost $50 million to make that album today.
It just wouldn't be cost benefit. There would be no benefit in it.
I tell you what, though,
I think that album has something like 150 samples on it.
Bro, I tell you what, though, money does talk, and in today's era, if it's a sample and Drake jump on it, it's going to get cleared.
Yeah,
they gonna clear that.
Soul got bit with that same bug on their first album.
Yeah, I mean they cleared everything except the joint from the Turtles.
Yeah, they got hit. They got hit bad.
And even more to the splice point, I saw something recently where somebody grabbed a whole bunch of samples on Splice, made a whole bunch of beats out of them, put them in the Content ID system, just so that when anybody else used those samples, they would get paid from their Content ID system.
Wow.
Those are and it's technically not breaking any laws either.
That's clever.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah.
But he has this person has 195 albums on distribution. That's all they did. That's another thing you're going to run into with this. People are going to be able to pay attention to this stuff. So.
It's only going to get to Lone's point.
Imagine buying that. Imagine buying a sample pack and then you can't use it. You know what I mean?
That's petty to upload all them albums.
That's that Martin Shkreli, whatever his name is.
Shkreli.
Shkreli. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that mind state.
Well, I mean, it's only going to get or if you want to call it, where it's only going to get more difficult. We'll say
Yeah.
as technology advances.